DevilNeverCry.
What is up, everyone? It is me, DevilNeverCry, and you join me today for my review of Alan Wake 2. Before we begin, I'd like to make note that this is a spoiler-free review. All the footage seen in the background is from fairly early on in the game, and I'll be staying away from any spoilery narrative topics. Alan Wake 2 is a third-person survival horror game that takes place 13 years after the original. It follows two protagonists this time around, the FBI agent Saga Anderson, currently investigating the murders of a cult, and Alan Wake, the eponymous writer, currently trapped in the Dark Place, a realm where nightmares are manifested into reality and where solitude is seldom found. Those of you who have played the original will likely feel right at home as you step into the shoes of Alan Wake once more. The game is chock full of references to the original game, as well as other games in Remedy's wheelhouse. But the game also does a good job of acclimatizing new players to the madness of Alan Wake through the eyes of Saga, as she herself struggles to come to grips with what waits in the dark. After 13 years of waiting for a sequel, the expectations were quite high, but it's safe to say that I thoroughly enjoyed the twists and turns that the narrative took me through, allowing us to finally see somewhat of a conclusion to Alan Wake's story after waiting so long. It is worth mentioning, however, that everyone will likely experience the narrative slightly differently thanks to a gameplay mechanic that allows you to switch between the two protagonists at very specific points, allowing you to pick and choose whose story you want to see play out at any given moment. And on the topic of gameplay, let's talk about everything Alan Wake 2 does to set it apart from the original. The gameplay and its structure has been completely revamped for Alan Wake 2, allowing for a more contemporary feel. Whilst the first Alan Wake was more of an action-adventure with some thriller elements, this has gone heavy on the survival horror. The game plays as a third-person shooter with some light resource management thrown in for good measure. You have access to a gun, which you'll be needing to take down the numerous amount of monsters that come your way, and a torch, which serves as another resource to manage. The torch effectively is used to burn away the dark from the Taken, beings or people who have been overcome with literal darkness and who are out for your blood. At any given moment, you'll have access to a somewhat limited inventory to fill with the limited amounts of ammunition and resources that you come across. Like any good survival horror game out there, you'll find yourself with limited amounts of reprieve in which you're able to catch your breath. These often come in the form of streetlights, whose pale glow does just enough to keep the darkness at bay, or in the form of well-lit break rooms, which come complete with coffee thermoses which allow you to save your progress, and storage boxes. If it sounds as though Alan Wake 2 has a lot in common with Resident Evil titles, it's because it truly does. It feels as though Remedy took a look at the recent Resident Evil remakes and decided to take pieces of it to use as a framework for Alan Wake 2, and it does so to good effect. The game does a fantastic job of filling you with an uneasy tension throughout its entire duration. Whenever you're not basking in the glow of a light, it really feels as though danger could come at any moment, whether it's through the dark, oppressive environments that seem to twist and turn on you, or the anxiety-inducing sound design that crawls under your skin. Alan Wake 2 makes sure that once you've just started to fall into the safety of a routine, to buck the trend, break the cycle, and have you feeling uneasy all over again. Fighting and running from enemies isn't all you'll be doing, however. The game has its fair share of brain-teasing puzzles that often come with rewards that are worth seeking out. The puzzles will often have you interacting with the environment, forcing the player to engage with the game and its mechanics if they want to progress. As an example, one of the very first puzzles that I came across as Saga was to do with nursery rhymes, in which the player has to figure out what exactly the nursery rhymes are saying, collect very specific dolls that are scattered somewhere throughout the environment, come back to those drawings, and place the dolls according to what exactly the nursery rhyme is trying to say. And in doing so, I was able to unlock a charm to equip to Saga's bracelet, with the charm providing some form of beneficial advantage in combat. By throwing out lucrative rewards such as new weapons or new charms that can aid you in combat, the game is effectively incentivizing you to explore, with the added drawback being that exploration is dangerous and that you could end up spending a whole lot of resources just to get to where you want to, and that is a battle, an internal battle or gambit that players are going to have to weigh up every time they play. It seems as though Remedy has learned from the feedback they got for their previous game Control, in that they've now made a functional map that actually works quite well. The map is going to be your lifeline throughout this game. It's going to be what you use to traverse throughout the environment, but it's also going to be used to make note of items or locked doors or cabinets that you've found that you may want to come back to later. Exploration, and by extension the map, are vital to the game's upgrade system. Saga is able to upgrade her weapons by finding manuscript fragments locked away in lunchboxes scattered throughout the environment. Alan is also able to upgrade his weapons as well as himself by finding words of power scattered throughout the environment in the Dark Place. This new added upgrade system effectively allows a player to tailor the way that the characters or protagonists are built up to suit their playstyle. They act as yet another temptation to stray off the beaten path and step into the darkness. One of the other new additions to gameplay in Alan Wake 2 is the concept of the Mind Palace. Both Saga and Alan are able to enter their own internal Mind Palace in which they're able to figure out the narrative. For Saga, this takes the form of a caseboard in which she is physically able to map out all of the evidence found during gameplay. By using these pieces of evidence to build so-called cases, you are able to come to new deductions, allowing these deductions to progress the narrative. Though initially moving around the caseboard felt somewhat clunky, once I got used to how it controlled, I found it to be quite intuitive, and I actually enjoyed going through the pieces of evidence found, as it felt like a great way to engage the player and almost test them to make sure that they are paying attention to the story that's currently unfolding. Alan's mind place is different altogether. Alan has access to the writer's room in which he's able to map out a plot board. Alan's a writer, not a detective, so his plot board is effectively used in a more tangible scenario. Alan is able to physically rewrite the dark place around him as he sees fit to suit whatever narrative he's trying to get to the bottom of. Instead of finding pieces of evidence, Alan can sometimes be struck by inspiration when he reaches specific locations, with the inspiration coming in the form of words. These words can then be used on the writer's board to change scenarios entirely. Rewriting reality allows you to access areas you might not have had access to before, and also can unlock specific secrets if you know where you're looking. Alan also has access to an angel lamp at all times. This is a special lamp that can absorb light from specific places and transfer it to another, with the similar concept of taking away and adding light to areas, drastically changing them, again allowing you to find new resources, secrets, or unlock the way forward. To summarize the gameplay succinctly, I'd say it's an evolution of the original Alan Wake. That game's framework effectively modernized and brought up to contemporary standards. Moving on, let's talk about some of the more technical details. I played Alan Wake 2 on a PS5, and I played on the performance mode. I believe the performance mode targets 1440p with a frame rate that attempts to achieve 60 frames per second. Overall, during my time with Alan Wake 2, I didn't have any issues with the game's performance. I didn't notice any weird stuttering or any large frame drops. The game itself looks absolutely gorgeous, though I think that's more so due to the game's strong art direction than anything like resolution or frame rate. If there was anything that I had to demerit the game for, it would be some weird audio balancing that occurred with some of the cutscenes. At times the cutscenes would be a little low on the audio side, so I'd have to crank them up, only to have my ears subsequently blown out when we switch back to gameplay. Though I do believe Remedy are aware of this issue, and it is going to be fixed in an upcoming patch. Also, with the game being as beautiful and as striking as it is, it definitely needed a photo mode. Though again, Remedy have confirmed that a photo mode is planned for an upcoming patch, alongside New Game Plus. And so having said all that, we come to my final verdict for Alan Wake 2. I think, or I believe that this is definitely a must-play title for any horror, survival horror, or even thriller fans out there. I've been looking forward to Alan Wake 2 and all of its weirdness ever since it was announced, more so the closer and closer that we got to launch. And I can safely say, at least for me personally, it certainly delivered and pretty much exceeded a lot of the expectations that I had. And that about wraps it up for my review of Alan Wake 2. Leave a like and subscribe if you're interested in more Alan Wake 2 content, as there's plenty more on the way. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.